What's up, future shred lords? Welcome back to the Fingers. We're really getting into scale hacks here. Essentially, this is a question I got a little while back and I forgot about it, but this is a good video. So number one is breaking down sort of scales by regions, right? So essentially, you've got the sort of like standard one there, which is just playing vertically up and down. We're going to start with that. So essentially, there's the Ionian position. But if I move to the second note, Dorian, nice. And Phrygian, and so on and so forth. And of course I can keep doing that, right? But if I start here. You see what I'm getting at there? Is now I can do it for each one of them. And that is incredibly useful. Of course, just matching them up with the caged chords too is going to be amazing. If you're like, here's the first degree as the caged chord, the E-type, this chord basically matches up beautifully with the scale. Because it uses, of course, all the same notes, right? But when I want to go to a different one here, I'm like, that's going to be this one. But if I'm playing it like this, it's the G type, right? I've got this new configuration, right? And that becomes where you get to dissecting sort of the 3 notes per string stuff, starting on any note. That's essentially part of Locrian then. Right, and so essentially what I'm doing there is just starting on the one and then moving through it. Nice, right? So that's got to be number one there. Is not only do you set up the regions, but you can start lumping the scales together based around chord shapes, right? And then, of course, and the last one would be the arpeggio. And honestly, there, remember, you're talking about the Dorian position there for 3 notes per string. When I go up here, right? So I think you get the idea there that I can't just break the sequence. Now, listen, I can do superimposition and stuff like that, but we're not going to get into that. But again, I'm thinking there is the Phrygian position. There's Mixolydian. So I'm starting off there with just the pentatonic. Right, so that right there is me going between 5 and 6. Right there, 6. Right, so of course, there's lots of stuff you can do here too. There's the A. Now you're like, what did you just do there, you crazy idiot? So basically I'm starting off with the first 2 notes of the Mixolydian pentatonic. This is the 2nd degree, minor. Now that's a G type, but when I'm on the A string, that's the C type and the D type, right? Basically they're interchangeable. Those 2 pieces are whatever, connected together. The C type at the low end, and this, and then the D type when you sort of, I can't do it, okay? So there it is, based around this kind of situation, and there it is. I'm sort of like, those ones come from Phrygian. Now you'll notice there, when I went into the Phrygian like that, obviously negative. That didn't sound good at all comparably to the first one, right? And that just basically reinforces the idea of musicality through just common sense. If you play an arpeggio like that or whatever based on a position, and obviously I'm not really breaking the bank, you should know these shapes already from the cage stuff. Just playing these chords, that should be bass level stuff. We're going to get into it in the foundations, but as far as practicing, that should be absolutely on the list. And that's the idea, is now I've taken this idea and started to refine it. Like, I know this is the second degree. There's 3, 4, 5, right? 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you see that, like when you hear the scale out of sequence like that, it can really mess with your sort of sense of, the order that you just established. And that's why it's so important to start to break this stuff down by region, right? You're like, there's the A, that's the second degree of what I'm working in. It's going to be minor just because of its tonality. Or I could do a minor 7 if I wanted to. And you're like, how do I do that with respect to this A here? And I'd probably play it like that. Right, so you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. The next one is like obviously replications. There's certain things that are incredibly useful, like this first inversion dominant 7 arpeggio from Locrian. Okay, you can do it here. Again, at the flat 2. So my point being here is you can use that to sort of do flip-flops. So I'm going to do 7-1, and then I'm going to do flat 2, and then 2. And of course, the next one would be flat 3 and 3, and you're climbing up chromatically. And you're setting up each one, but now I'm sort of using this one arpeggio. I understand that you're probably not going to be doing that stuff like tomorrow, but my point being here is you're seeing me now start to expand on this basic information, take something else borrowed from another key and put it together with the stuff that I'm already doing. That's the last stage with respect to scales, where you're starting to do this idea where you're like diminish. Right? It's sort of like one of the key components to being a great musician, but how do you practice that? Well, the key is after you sort of like start to master stuff, you can play the same scale sequence, and you're like, oh look, that's the Dorian pentatonic there. There's the major scale. And then you're like, that's from the Phrygian position, sorry, wrong note there. I'm trying to talk and do this at the same time. Fail! So you get the idea. I'm always knowing where I am, and of course I can then use that to my advantage, right? When I'm like thinking about what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, there's a triad arpeggio, diminished, second degree, diminish, and then first degree, resolution into the 7th. Right, that's all one major 7 arpeggio. Ionian position, Locrian position, ending in an Ionian again. Or whatever you want to do, or whatever, one of the fancier ones. Totally up to you, right? And that basically is enough for the guitar hacks stuff. Number 1, the idea of sort of like subdividing a scale. once you get to that one on the A string, that's brutal, right? Of course. And keep going until you get through all of them. And then, of course, you're like, that came from the E-type chord. And then you're like, okay, the next one is E. I'm also going to do it here. 3 notes per string. And then you're like, and so on and so forth, right? Then, of course, you're going to move on and basically be like, I have a scale. I have a chord, I have a pentatonic scale, and I have, of course, the arpeggio. And so with all of that information now, you can basically build some really, really killer sort of sequences, right? So let's say, for example, start off with diminished in Locrian. Major scale. Okay, or maybe start off in the 2nd degree here. Dominant 7. Okay, not my best there, but it was a last minute addition, right? Doing it in groups of 4. So that stuff right there. Now, of course, you see me starting off with just the obvious diminished into the scale, which doesn't sound that great, right? So in this case, I started with diminished dominant 7 to set up the major. Oh, I can do it. I'll take the win and shut her down right there. Sometimes you just got to know when to quit, right? And of course, last but not least, knowing how to basically be like, okay, so I've got this or whatever, and then I've got one of these and then one of these. So you're like, right? So I can break that down basically for every single one. I'm just using the same pattern. And then, of course, if you want the connecting part, that one there is a little more tricky, obviously, starting in Aeolian up to do, of course, Locrian, Major, Dorian, Phrygian, Dorian, into the Ionian again. See what I mean? So stuff like that automatically really boosts the sort of cerebral aspect of your practice session, because you're like, Aeolian? Sorry. Then you're like, oh, Ionian now. Dorian, Phrygian, Dorian, Ionian, Locrian, pentatonic, 2 notes per string. And finally ending with the classical method, done. I hope this video helps to a certain degree. It's dependent on you to sort of sit down and start to break it up, break it up. 3rd degree, minor, G-type. Why don't you like, there's the B. Like, there's my B up here, there's A to B. So you might want to start factoring that in there with your minor pentatonic there, right? So you're like, what? You're like, yeah. Come on, kid. All of a sudden, chicks are lifting up their shirt at the rock concert and life makes sense. it's just like that. You know what I mean? It starts off with just on the lower strings, but once you start applying this basic information everywhere else, and it forces you to be like, oh, look, there's a B. There's a B. You're like, there's a B. You're like, oh, I need a minor. That's major. Okay, there's my minor. There's the lowered third, right? And then when you need a fifth, where's the fifth? And relative to that, building a triad now. You see what I'm getting at? You start off with just sort of picking off this note. You're like, okay, what kind of chord can I build off that? How do I build a minor chord? I need the first degree, I need a lowered third, and I need its fifth degree. That gives me a minor triad. Then you're like, that's part of this particular system, caged or whatnot, like when I did it here. That's from the C type, right? There's the D type. Like E type. You're like A type there. Okay, so knowing those positions and knowing the actual, of course, the A one here, Mixolydian. And of course, Aeolian. Right, so that of course gives me the idea where I'm sort of like, you see what I mean? I'm basing it around the idea that I'm like, oh, there's that caged chord here, there's that arpeggio, there's the pentatonics there, there's the notes from Lydian. Taking all of those elements together, jam them together, I can basically solo for a lot of mileage in then one position, right? And of course, start tacking on more advanced stuff there, and then all of a sudden you're off to the races. You're like, oh, that's Dominant 7 territory. Nails it. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you. Good luck in your practice sessions. Just start off. Be like, okay, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. You're like fifth degree using the G type. You're like G type using classical method. You're like 3 notes per string. You're like minor pentatonic. Then you're like chord. There's that one. There's that one. There's this one up here. Right? And then of course you're like the arpeggios. Okay, and so on and so forth. Again, A type there. So I'm just... I'm sorry, I'm getting a little confused there. I was doing the sort of these really cool sort of diminished ones, and now all of a sudden I have tunnel vision myself, and I shouldn't have done that, but it is what it is. But you get the idea. I know where this is. Like there's the D as an A-type chord, there's the D as a G-type chord, there's the D as an E-type chord, there's the D as the D-type chord, right? That puts this third degree, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, root. Whoops. I almost nailed it, okay? So that's, you just saw me do the whole thing there. Right, now the video's over and I'll shut up. Good luck. We'll see you in the next one.